Let's go ahead and start there. I am Graham Montrose. I'm the training officer for the Potomac Rugby Referee Society. And our training topic tonight, I'm gonna go ahead and get ready to share my screen here. Our topic is we're comparing refereeing to a chess game. We're talking about the idea of sort of being 3 steps ahead, playing 3D chess, and really trying to think about those scenarios that we've all heard from our ref coaches. Thinking about, if you'd had that penalty in the 3rd minute, would you have the yellow card in the 56th minute? We've all heard it, but is that something that is really true? So bear with me 1 second. Let's pull up the presentation here. All righty. So let's play chess. And remember, again, if you want to throw a comment or question in the chat, you're absolutely welcome to do that. So our first thought here, game management is a chess match. There's a funny old saying, a man, a plan, a canal, Panama, because it's the same forwards and backwards, but it's kind of a useful thing to put in our heads that we're thinking about the person on the field using the law and management guidelines. That's our plan. And then we are directing play into productive channels, and then we're creating positive outcomes. So just thinking about that in our head, that we are a person, we have a plan, we're going to do some great things that have far-reaching effects, but we have to have the plan. So our book moves that we want to think about hard actions, and we want to think about soft actions. So when we're looking at sort of our structural thoughts, we're thinking about what we're doing as a referee as pressure valve. We're relieving pressure or we're increasing pressure. Sometimes increasing pressure can be really, really beneficial. Sometimes we need to dial that pressure back. And how do we do that? So we're looking at hard actions. They're structural to a game. They're kind of like, to use another metaphor, they're like a brick in a wall. So not only do the first ones you lay down have to be accurate, there have to be some doors and windows for people to go through. And then people can't, because you're not going to be able to go around it, right? It's structural. Players have to move, they have to adapt. You lay that brick, people have to move around it. These are things like our PKs, our yellow cards, our red cards, because when we do that, not only are we thinking about our PKs are going to be consistent, right? Our penalty kicks, they're going to be consistent. All of our penalty kick bricks are going to look the same. Same thing with our yellow cards, our red cards. That's kind of what a lot of referees talk about. Their buzzword is setting standards, right? These are our hard actions. These are our standards. This is the framework under which we want to operate. Thinking about our soft actions. Soft actions have less impact. They have a little bit softer influence on our outcomes. They can be used to shape the game. They can be used in a very targeted way that sometimes our hard actions can't be used. They're thinking about scrums. We're thinking about free kicks. We're thinking about voice management, things that aren't usually resulting in points opportunities. They're not necessarily things that are going to result in perhaps somebody leaving the field. Like, these are softer things that shape the game nonetheless. Again, both of these types of actions act as pressure valves. Used well, a combination of hard and soft actions can create fast, athletic, safe, exciting rugby. Now, it's something that a lot of people talk about, that in rugby, that you kind of get a feel for the game. And that's kind of what we're doing tonight, as we're talking about sort of narrowing down, what does that feel actually mean? What are our benchmarks for that? How do we understand it? How do we break it down into its elements and understand what exactly is feel for the game? And we've all been in situations where we feel that there's a lot of emotion happening, or there's a momentum to the game, or there's things that are going on that we don't necessarily understand, but we as referees eventually theoretically train ourselves to be able to work with. And that's kind of what we're doing. As I said, we're quantifying that, we're breaking it down, we're figuring out how to use it and how to shape it. So when we're thinking about pressure valves and our hard actions, again, hard actions are forcing players to change their play. As we said, if there's too many hard actions, you've built a solid wall, right? There's no opportunity. There's no direction. There's nowhere to go. You just have to bang your head against the wall. People get frustrated. And so if we're thinking about too many hard actions, too many yellow cards, too many red cards, obviously that's a huge impact, but even too many penalties, too many penalty kicks, you're not doing what you set out to do. You're building a solid wall. You're not building a house with windows and doors, right? You're not letting people have avenues to walk through. 25 is our magic number. So we brought this up in other presentations, but 25 PKs, if you get above that, if you're watching your film, you're kind of watching somebody else's film, if you're getting more than 25 penalty kicks, that's sort of a universal giant symbol that somebody is using too many of these hard actions, and that there's probably going to be a lot of frustration from the teams. People don't understand how to play, and it's become something where you really feel like there's no contest anymore. It's not fun. You've limited the moves that somebody else can make to a degree where it's not a good game. So one of the triggers for me sometimes that I know that I have been inconsistent or that I have laid down too solid a foundation is sometimes when I hear a captain say, stay out of the breakdowns, don't contest on defense, stay out, stay out. Then I'm like, I must have done something to make them feel like they can't have that contest. So that's a good trigger. Looking at our soft actions, a lot of times they're too fragile on their own to provide the structure that we're looking at, but they're a critical tool because they can be aimed at specific targets. I put my image of a mosquito here, right? We don't want to use a hammer to kill the mosquito, but we still need to be able to deal with it. If you have a mosquito of a player in your ear, not leaving you alone, what are the ways to handle that? You can't penalize him, right? Or her. You can't penalize them, but what you can do is have a word with the captain, be like, hey, I need you as the leader of this team, sort that out. So that's a soft action, right? You get to a scrum, you have somebody who's just standing up. I don't feel safe. I can't do this. I'm like, you got to scrum at some point. So have fun. Free kick, right? There's ways to get out of this with these softer actions that don't have points implications, that a lot of times aren't conferring that territorial tactical advantage. 50-22, separate discussion, but most of the time they're not conferring an advantage. They're not going to be a point scoring opportunity. These are soft actions, and that's including everything from our voice management, our quick words, our walking around, using our positioning, and some of the moves that we talked about in previous presentations, looking at using these opportunities for soft actions. All right, so before we move on, does anybody have questions to this point on our hard and our soft actions? Hearing none, we shall continue. Okay, so what moves matter most? Has anybody ever played chess? I'm sure most people have at least looked at it or seen you have some familiarity with what's going on. So the pawns are the first to move. They form the rank in front. They're small, they're relatively insignificant. They don't have a lot of power, except for the fact that whatever a pawn does cannot be undone. And I think that's really important for what we're talking about tonight, because your first penalties, that foundation of our bricks, our wall, those first penalties, the first structure we give to the game, we can't undo it. So the pawn cannot move backward, and wherever that goes, everything else has to figure out how to follow behind it. So our first couple of penalties, again, we're using that buzzword, setting standards. So setting standards is saying, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I'd like, this is what's going to be consistently called throughout the rest of the game. If we start to see, a normal penalty pattern that we're thinking about here is we see an initial flurry, right? We're thinking those first 20 minutes, there's going to be some communication via hard actions between the referee and the teams, that first flurry. Then we should see a dip going into halftime. We should see a brief but smaller spike in those first few minutes after the half. We've talked about this again in previous presentations. We have some challenges with substitutions coming on. Second half, you have sort of a different team makeup. You as the referee, you're probably thinking about things that went on in the first half. You're starting to feel the mental and physical pressure. So you'll see that brief spike in the second half. And then usually you'll have sort of smooth sailing on that downward curve towards the end of the game. If you're seeing a lot of penalties at the end of the game, there are some circumstances in which that can happen, but usually it's the referee. And the referee has gotten into a bad place, possibly because they built a bad foundation. and they're frantically throwing bricks up there, maybe that'll save me more and more. Try to get control. Build that foundation, move your pawns in a thoughtful and considered way, because what you can't do is go backwards. So that's an important thought here. So what moves matter most? Again, we talked about this. We're setting the framework for the rest of the match. What are our kinds of pressure? So let's pause there again. Any other questions at that point? Talking about, what we see in a match. Again, we have that curve. The first 20 minutes, we'll see sort of a downward slope into halftime, about half as much kind of in that third quarter. And then that last 20 minutes, you really shouldn't see a ton of penalties or those hard actions. What you should see is a referee doing a lot of management. You should see the referee using their voice. You should see the referee working to build that rapport, build that relationship with the teams. So any other questions to this point? Cool. So now we're going to kind of talk about what are our kinds of pressure. So we've talked about our tools that we are using, these hard and these soft actions to influence, where we're using them as the pressure valve. We're dialing up or down. We're using these tools. But what are we using them for? What problems are we trying to address? So I've identified that there are 3, and again, these are all sort of categories that make sense to me, and we can have a discussion about the nuance. There may be subcategories, but for me, I've identified 3 categories of pressure. There is emotional pressure. This is something where the players are tired, they're frustrated, they feel hard done by, they might feel they have something to prove. Everybody can think of situations in a match where one of these things is happening, if not to the whole team or both teams, at least to 1 or 2 individuals, right? Soft actions are a tool for emotional pressure. We use temporal separation. We use time separation. Does anybody want to be bold? Tell me what are we thinking of when we think of temporal separation? Anybody?
I'm going to Google that word now.
That's a great idea. Okay, well, I'll get you on the next one, but Google that word. So temporal. Let's see what we got in the chat here. Buzz McLean, that's right, our writer has chimed in. Time separation. So great tools for time separation. Thinking about maybe as a referee, like there's a really high pressure situation. I have 2 teams, there's a penalty, we're close to the goal line. The mark was back there. We need to make sure we take it from the mark. Creating temporal separation. You're slowing things down. Maybe it's a soft action of a scrum. Maybe you're saying, I have a penalty, potentially a yellow card. Holy moly, might be a penalty try, but I'm 50-50. I don't know. I, as the referee, I'm going to take that 50-50 knock on. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take the opportunity to get temporal separation, slow things down. You can't overuse this, obviously, because if you slow things down too much, you as the referee are putting too much into that game. You're starting to take away that contest, which is what we don't want to do. But temporal separation. What about physical separation? Can anybody think of an example of physical separation? Like what can you as a referee do to encourage physical separation using the law?
The offside line.
Vince, what was that?
The offsides line.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yep, that's a great idea. Using the offsides line, you can definitely, encourage that with some of our motions. We've all seen this motion from referees. We've seen that encouraged via hard actions. But another one sometimes is a scrum, right? Like if you have problems boiling over in the backs, maybe you're like, I'm going to take that 50-50 knock on. I'm going to make them go stand 20 meters apart, look at each other. We're going to regroup over here. Now, if you have problems in the forwards, maybe that's not your solution, but these are the kinds of things that we're thinking of: physical, temporal separation to address emotional pressure. Okay. Physical pressure. We're thinking, this is honestly, yeah, I see Vinny saying slow walk, point to the mark. Yep. Slow walk to set the 10 meter. These are definitely opportunities. I've also seen referees do it where, like, controversial try, they'll walk up, stare at it, and walk away, right? Like they're getting that physical separation. So yeah, these are all great tools. So physical pressure, again, this is the best kind. hard hits, athletic play. Players want a fastball. They take care of themselves. They want they want to go out there and kill each other. This is a high level of competition. These are players that want to play. It's a bright sunny day. We are here to have a great Saturday. So this is the kind that you want, but it can very easily boil over into foul play, right? And that's what we don't want. So how do we have these physical actions that we want to encourage? We want the speed, we want this power. We use hard actions here, okay? Just say, look, we're gonna keep this moving, but you gotta play my game. So here's my standard for the offside line, as Vince pointed out. Here's my standard for foul play. Here's my standard for the tackle. I'm going to be exquisitely clear. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm going to reward dominance. I'm going to reward positive play. There's no conversation. There's nothing slowing it down. I'm going to let you go as long as you play inside the framework that I've set up. This requires a lot of mental and physical effort from the referee, because you have to be quick. You have to be mentally with it. You have to be willing to sell a call hard. But it's awesome when you get it right. Technical pressure, this is the worst. This is the one that everybody hates, and we've all felt it. When there's a mismatch between the player mindset and the referee. Now, this can happen at any level. Sometimes it's a situation where you have a team that really doesn't know the game that well, but they have an idea, or they're feeling frustrated because they're like, I think I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but the referee's not giving me any help. Sometimes you have a situation in which the player's like, I know the standard. And you're like, bro, that hasn't been the standard since 1996, but okay. And he's like, no, I got it. So that's definitely a situation that we've all been in. Or you have a situation in which we have very, very, very high level players. We have players that have been playing the game for years. They've studied the game and they know they can outthink the referee. Referee theoretically can deal with that, but sometimes we can't, especially when we're going up a level. We feel intimidated, and we have a situation where that player is going to try to outthink us. They're going to mentally wrestle with us. This is technical pressure. This is the mismatch between the referee's mindset and the player's mindset. And sometimes you have to work and figure that out to how to get everybody on the same page. This is a lot of mental pressure on the referee. It can be exhausting. So what you don't do is you don't talk to them. You avoid our conversation. We avoid our soft actions. We're going to say we have a clear standard. Again, this really requires the referee to have an idea of what they want and to communicate it clearly and effectively. Okay, and effectiveness in delivering these things is a different conversation, but this is the goal: clearly and effectively communicating a standard. And then when you have an opportunity at, say, a stoppage, then you can employ your soft actions. Again, avoiding conversation. We're not letting people in. We're not going to be best friends. We can let off. It's the substitute teacher theory, right? You walk into that classroom, you try to be everyone's best friend, they're going to eat you alive. But if you go in, you act like a hard ass was the word I was going to use, and I thought about whether it was appropriate, but apologies to everyone. You act tough and then you back off a little bit. It's a much better strategy. All right. So any questions on our pressure conversation thus far? Okay. So we talked about this a little bit. We're thinking about our counter actions, right? So back to our chessboard, we're looking at our chessboard. They do this, what do I do next? If they're going to do this, what am I planning to do to respond to that? You know, I've set up my play. I know the framework of the game that I want to run. I'm going to start with, this shows you how much I know about chess, the fool's gambit, right? I'm going to start with this opening move. I think I know where it's going to go. If they do all the right things, they're going to fall right into my trap. And of course, it never goes that way. But they do this, and I have a plan. I at least have a plan for what I'm going to do to counteract that. So temporal separation, actions to slow down, speed up play. Hard actions can do both, right? Too many penalties will slow down the game because nobody can get momentum. It's not necessarily the penalty that is slowing down the game. It is the stoppage. It is the lack of cohesion. So that a player has to work with his team. You have to find that rhythm again. So it's not necessarily the penalty that slows down the game. It's breaking the momentum. Again, if we get too headstrong, we get too fast, we're going too hard. Sometimes we need to bring that back. But too many destroys any kind of momentum. So physical, creating actual distance, thinking about restarts in particular as an opportunity to create physical separation. staying physically away from the talkers. We've always had, all of us have been in a situation where we have somebody coming up and say, hey, ref, talk about this, talk about this. Hey, can we look at that? I'm either going to physically kind of keep myself away and like look at something over there. I'm going to talk to the captain. I'm going to find these opportunities to avoid that conversation. Don't let them in because it's a mental drain that I don't need. Okay. Creating that playing space. Again, Vince identified this, create playing space, give them lots of room to run and they will go. Mental counteractions. We're looking at this mismatch, this technical pressure, clear framework, hard action, create a window. And not only do you create a window or a door, you got to go through that window or door. You can't brush your shoulder against the jamb. You can't bump into anything. You got to go straight down the middle. Straight and narrow is the way to go. That's our mental opportunity there. So you're starting out, you're getting a very clear standard. This is the standard I'm looking for without being overbearing, right? Path of least resistance is kind of what we're thinking about. Create the path of least resistance, encourage folks to follow it, tell a story, okay? And we've all heard this again from our referee coaches, but does anybody want to be brave and tell me, what does this buzzword tell a story mean? What's that buzzword? Tell a story. There's a magic number involved that Richard Every taught to me that I found extremely useful. Does anybody remember from any of the D1A or NIRA calls, that rule of 3? Okay, well, we'll go over it again here. This is a great opportunity. So the rule of 3 is, do you have 3 penalties in a row? You're starting to look for a card, right? Why? Not because you're looking for a card, but because everybody else at that point is looking for a card because you've said something 3 times. If your mom says something 3 times, she's bringing out the wooden spoon. Your voice isn't working. We got to go to something else. We got to take one of our hard actions. What are we seeing here in the chat? I tell you, I warn you, I penalize you. Okay, so that's one strategy. I would argue that when we're looking at our opportunities here, we're thinking about our hard and our soft actions. Sometimes the penalty first can be very effective, right? That the telling and the warning is something that can be used in a different context, perhaps at a stoppage, perhaps if we have, an opportunity where folks maybe don't have as great a grasp on the game. But again, let's think about which tools are the most effective here. But if we are telling that story, we're seeing penalties of the same kind. We're seeing pressure ramping up. We're inside the 22. Somebody's knocking on the door. But momentum is the biggest thing. We're seeing momentum. And it's not something that the referee is doing. It's not something that the attack is doing. The defense is killing the momentum. So that is the biggest trigger for me to say, I need to tell a story. I'm seeing a story. I need to tell the story through my actions is that the defense is killing momentum. Okay. So if we see that, we can respond to it and we have the tools. Right. So understanding pressure, applying our counter actions, our countermeasures, we're focusing play for positive outcomes. Now, what we can't do is be rigid, right? We go into it sometimes, a lot of us, especially early on in our careers, our referee coaches say, do you have a game plan? Do you have a game plan? And exactly what this is a game plan. It's saying, I have an idea of the kind of pressures I'm going to face. I have an idea of what countermeasures I would use. What are my actions? What is my framework going to look like, right? If I know my standards, I have blazed the path. I know how wide it is. I know where it goes. Then it's easier to stay on it and keep everybody else on it. That path of least resistance, that's a game plan. But what we can't do is let our game plan be rigid, because it may not be the case that today was the day for the scrums, or it may be the case that the heavens opened, the field is a sloppy mess, and you're going to scrum all day. You don't necessarily know. So what you can't do is be rigid. We have to react to the circumstances. If our team takes a different direction, all of a sudden we have a lot of technical pressure because there is a superstar who thinks that he can wrap the referee around his or her little finger, then that's a different pressure and we have to be able to respond to it. So that's why it's really helpful to have these tools in our pocket, understanding what kind of pressure, one of those 3 things. We're thinking about our emotional pressure, our physical pressure, our technical pressure. What kind of pressure? What kind of tools? Are they hard actions? Are they soft actions? What are our physical? What are our temporal? What are our mental tools that we are going to use to adjust and make sure that we are all getting to those positive outcomes. Okay, so back to kind of what we were thinking about. If you gave this PK in the 11th minute, that's the pawns. That's exactly what we just talked about. If you're setting those clear intentional standards, you're having that flurry of penalties sort of in the first 20 minutes saying, I'm communicating, I as the referee, I've communicated to you my framework. I built my wall of PKs. There are doors, there are windows. You can go through them. You can play your game. Again, we never want to exceed that magic 25 number, but we have built our good foundation. Everybody has an obvious path forward. They know where to go. If we stray from the path, it's easy to say, look, I gave you the path, go on the path. But if you, the referee, do not know where the path is, you don't know what your game plan is, you don't know what gambit you're going to run, right? Everybody's in trouble because nobody knows where to go. So that's kind of what that phrase means, which took me a very long time to kind of puzzle that out. So hopefully you guys have a shortcut now. All right, so before we go on to examples, we are going to think about some real life situations and kind of walk through them and have a group discussion. Do we have any questions, comments on what we've talked about so far? All right, I will take crickets as consensus and move forward. Okay, so example number one, we have an academy match. Players are all trying to secure a spot on a select side. One player, she stands out as an athlete, but she knows it. And she thinks she can mentally outmatch the ref. What kinds of pressure? Let's start there. First question, what kinds of pressure do we see in this scenario? Anybody? Come on, be brave. I see some new faces. We should definitely hear from some of our new folks. I see, okay, Vinny, yeah, we got
Emotional.
technical. Who was that?
This is Marlena. I said emotional.
Okay, definitely emotional, right? People got something to prove. Yeah, that's perfect. We definitely have that technical pressure. So well done, you guys, for identifying those are the two things that we're definitely getting at in this situation. So what types of actions can we take? And I put a big red X here and I said inconsistency is a no-no in this situation because it really is. Does anybody want to elaborate on that and talk some more? Blake, what do you think?
I was just thinking if she's not the captain, if she starts trying to talk about the rules, tell her to send it through the captain and just
Great.
ignore it from there.
That is absolutely spot on. Perfect. Great idea. Okay. So yeah, so we can definitely be like, look, you know, we can't have this conversation, but just make sure you're directing it through your captain, right? Like just send your questions to your captain. Fantastic. All right. Craig, what if she is the captain?
I think you can use temporal in the sense that I hear what you're saying, but now's not the time to talk about it.
It's a great idea. Okay. Yeah. Anything else? So we can also think
just
about,
say,
sorry?
Hey, this is Buzz. My favorite line from Major League Rugby this year, I forget which ref said it during a game, but he said, the next time you ask for a penalty, you'll get one.
Bold.
Bold, right. Made a statement, set a parameter, and I think the player shut up.
Why does that sound like Mr. Doyle?
Yeah, it might have been him.
Yeah, he has a very direct way about him. But yeah, so this is a great thing that we're thinking about. Like, no, we don't want to engage in conversation. We are not going to ratchet up the emotional. And we're definitely not going to give somebody attention, right? We have a whole group of people that are all really wanting attention today. So we're not going to give anybody attention. We're going to go around, we're going to do our job. We're going to put a very pleasant, very bland smile on our face. And we're going to be accountants in this match. We're going to be precise. We're going to be careful. We're going to be completely uninteresting. We are accountants because they are all out there trying to kill each other. So we're going to direct that energy to a good place and we're not going to engage with it. So we're going to really back off on our soft actions and we're going to try really, really, really hard to avoid any kind of inconsistency because this is the kind of pressure that can just really boil over fast. Wayne Barnes to an X Kiwi. That's fantastic. So yeah, so great. That's one example. What about this one? So championship match, hard, fast field, beautiful day, backs battle. There's kicking all over the place, kicking, kicking, kicking. Foul play starts to crop up off the ball in the 60s. We've talked about the 60 to 70 minute mark is the kind of, it's the make or break for a match. Things can go really downhill or things can just smooth out for the rest of the match. Everybody's starting to get tired. You have some new substitutions coming in. The referee is mentally getting a little weary. A lot of things are happening in the 60s. Emotions run high, and you as the referee, I feel flustered. There's a lot happening. What kinds of pressure are we thinking about? What types of action? Let's start with what kinds of pressure? Anybody? Well, so I see the chat here. So let's have a quick conversation here. Blake, we'll get right back to you. I think you're exactly right. But let's get back to this question. So think about inconsistent. One side has a weaker pack, but you PK the other pack for a minor infringement. That's potentially an example of inconsistency. Definitely. I think more of what I'm thinking of is that we're looking at maybe our tackle standard, that somebody goes for the ball and you're like, no, I don't like that. And then somebody else goes for the ball and you're like, that's fine. And players are like, I can't tell the difference. That's inconsistency, right? Or if we're saying that like, the gate for this guy kind of went in a little bit sideways, maybe, but the gate for this guy was probably fine. We have those 50-50s that are going in two different directions. That's kind of what we're thinking of in terms of inconsistency. So that's one thing where our buzzword for this is always pictures, that when we look at a situation, we have a picture in our head. We've watched enough film. We've seen this. We looked at our little goofy drawings in the law book. We know what it is that we want to see. And then we don't see it. And that's an easy way to segue to an action, right? We know we have to take an action if we see that picture. So, okay. So back to you, Blake. We said physical pressure. That's exactly right. Physical pressure. Any other pressure here? We're definitely probably seeing some emotional pressure, right? It's a championship. Hearts and feelings are on the line. Yeah, I see from Craig, mental and emotional. Yeah, we're probably seeing a lot of things in this situation. And the referee is definitely feeling flustered. So even if the teams aren't necessarily putting a lot of mental pressure on the referee's feeling it, right? And they might be feeling it just from themselves. So we have a lot going on here. We start to see that foul play. We know we have to take action on foul play, but what do we do here? And so I put in big giant letters like penalty death spiral. We do not want to do this. Can anybody tell me what is a penalty death spiral?
Where the referee becomes overly effusive or just starts blowing way too many penalties for everything, trying to enforce the standard.
Great point, Vince. And so what is the referee seeking in that situation? What are they trying to get?
Compliance.
Compliance. I think control is the word that I'm looking for. Control. One PK begets another PK to fix the previous. Exactly. And so that's a situation in which you cannot help but become inconsistent, and you're seeking control. You're trying to wrestle the game back to a place, and that's actually the worst thing that we can do. So if you ever look at somebody's stats and you're looking at advantage, if you're in the NYRA or D1A group, or you're just looking at stats, we talked about there's sort of that initial peak, first 20 minutes, we're kind of sliding down a little bit into halftime. Then we see another bump, and then we're kind of sliding down again. If we see a big bump in the last 20 minutes, we know that that referee mentally fell apart, that they were seeking control. They were feeling flustered. They tried to wrestle the game back, but unfortunately, they'd already moved their pawns. Nobody's backing up here. So we're already in trouble. So what types of actions can we take as referees to avoid the penalty death spiral? Time, distance, chatting with captains, great ideas, Craig. So we're taking some of that physical and temporal separation. Some referees like really consciously take mental separation. They'll use a restart, use one of our softer actions, our scrums, our potentially walking to say a line out, potentially walking to the 50 after a conversion kick. These are times when we can take just a little extra time, not a lot. You don't want to make it obvious, but just a little stretch of time, mentally regroup. Some people like to snap a rubber band to just sort of reset, let it go. Some people like to just take a breath, I'll shake my hand. If you ever see me in a match and I start shaking my left hand, like I'm just letting it go, that's literally me being like, let it go, Gray. Just don't get flustered, forget what just happened and move on.
There's somebody else you can talk to also besides the captains.
Who's that, Tig?
Well, let's see if somebody else can figure it out. Especially you said foul play is brewing. There's somebody else you can talk to that'll give you a break other than the captains. There's a more sympathetic ear to be found.
Anybody want to take a guess at who's Tig's getting at?
Yeah, it's been posted.
I see in the chat here. Okay. Yep. ARs. Looks like we all have the right answer. Yeah, exactly. Your ARs. So it's something we've all seen referees do it sometimes where they'll call the AR over and they'll have a serious conversation. And I will tell you that at least 1 in 5 is the referee saying, it's a nice day today. I just needed a second. We're all just going to stand here for a second. I'm going to breathe and then we're going to go back. But we just had to have a very stern conversation about that.
Actually, I've even said that to captains.
Yeah.
Yeah, captains sometimes know that their teams need that 20-second break as well. And you don't have to be stern with the captain. Sometimes you and the captains both know everybody needs is 20 seconds of breath catching, and you don't have to make up nastiness or a talking to. You can just say, we're going to let everybody catch their breath here for a moment. Captains will go along. Captains appreciate that. They'll go along with you.
And Tig brings up a really, really good point. A lot of times when we're trying our soft actions, we can be, tough on the field. We can just give our totally non-emotional, hard actions. We're just like, I'm sorry, this is what we got to do. Not even I'm sorry, just like yellow card, go. We're not having a conversation about it. But when we have our soft actions, we have our opportunities to just say like, hey, look, we're moving on. Or here's my chance to use my voice management. Here's my chance to use my behavioral management. Treating people like equals goes a really long way. Especially when we have a situation, a lot of times when that mental pressure starts cropping up, the technical pressure starts cropping up, we have that mismatch between players, referees. We had a really funny conversation 2 weeks ago in which 3 very high level coaches, 2 D1 men's coaches, 1 MLR coach were all like, there's a law change. This is the answer. And fortunately, another referee was standing on the sidelines and was like, that's not a law change. And it's always going to be a 50 scrum 50. I'm sorry, it's a restart kick, scrum 50. And these coaches were like, law change. He was like, no. But he treated them like equals and he had a good conversation with them. And then that was the key to dealing with that technical imbalance there. So, all righty, let's move on. Okay. First match at a higher level for this referee. This referee is trying to bump up. They're trying to get one of their, moving up opportunities. This is a challenge for them. Lots of speed, hard hits. Players want fast ball. The referee is feeling overwhelmed by the pace. They're chasing the game. What kinds of pressure? What do we got?
Physical.
Definitely physical pressure. Definitely. So the players want to just go. So you as the referee, your opportunity here is ride the game. Get on your surfboard and catch that wave. Okay. Any other kind of pressure? Possibly some technical pressure as well, right? The teams know that the referee might be, they can kind of feel it out. Even if they don't know, they know that they can kind of see this referee wide-eyed running around. Now, again, what the referee cannot do is put a damper on that physical pressure. What you do not want to do is push people to slow down when they're not infringing, right? So it might feel good to you as the referee to try to get back, not even the control. Like we talked a little bit about the penalty death spiral. It's not really quite the same thing here. What we're thinking here is the referee's trying to slow things down because they're on the highway for the first time. Everything's moving really, really fast. So they just want to slow it down. but that's not what we want to do. We want to let that physical pressure go, let it go as long as it's going in a positive direction. We do not want to slow down that play. But what we can do is exactly what we just talked about, is sometimes you, the referee, can take your opportunities for that temporal separation to slow it down where you're like, I'm going to walk to this scrum and just regroup for a second. I'm going to use my positioning. This is a great opportunity to use our running lines and our positioning that we've talked about. Get there and say, this is the picture I saw. I'm not going to worry about the thing that maybe I saw it, maybe I didn't. I'm not going to worry about the 50-50s. Get that out of my head. I know what I saw. I know my picture. I have my game plan, right? I know what I'm trying to do in this match. And what I'm not going to do is slow things down. I'm not going to make 30 people slow down to meet me. So any other thoughts on actions? Catching a breath at scrums and lineouts. Perfect, right? Mentally regroup, snap your rubber band, shake your hand, take a breath. Those are your opportunities. Now, also, it is a tendency and a trend for referees to want to sort of penalize down to their level. And teams get frustrated at this, not only because you're slowing down the game, but because sometimes we see it where the best players are being penalized down because they're trying to do things. They're always trying to go after the ball. They're doing really athletic and amazing things. They're putting that physical pressure on the referee, and the referee is not necessarily penalizing them because they're infringing. The referee is penalizing them because they see them doing something and they're trying to get back that sense of what's happening. And sometimes the players that are less skilled slip by with actual infringements because the referee's not seeing that. Their eye isn't drawn to it because they're seeing the speeding car. So, right. Our last example, I think, whoops, we went back there. All right, last one, bonus points. Coach on the sidelines is loudly complaining about the referee's calls. What's our strategy? What kinds of pressure are we feeling from that? First of all, what kind of pressure are we thinking about? We're seeing emotional, we're seeing technical. Okay, so yeah, so that coach is having an impact on his team's emotion or her team's emotions. That coach is yelling, that coach is ramping up the emotion on the field, and the players are going to feel that. The players might start to question what's going on. All of a sudden, we start to have, exactly as we said, that technical pressure, that mismatch. The coach is like, the referee's getting it wrong. This is bad. This is terrible. And all of a sudden, they start trusting the person that they see every week as opposed to the person that they've never met before. So problematic in that the coach is acting as that pressure valve, is ratcheting up the pressure. What can you as the referee do to sort of dial down that pressure? What countermeasures can we take here? I'm seeing here in the chat, talk with the captain. Okay, yeah, that's your first step, right? Your first step is to say, captain, we can't have that, right? One of the ones that I like to use, because I'm kind of the worst sometimes, is playing the mental game of, I'll wait till we have a line out that's close-ish to the technical zone, but not quite near it. And I'll wait for the coaches to like come way out of the technical zone. So it's obvious to me, it's obvious to the players, it's obvious to everybody in the 40th row, that coach is way out of his zone. And then I'll be like, need you to stay in the technical zone and make them do the walk of shame while everybody watches them. Polite, kind. There's nothing in it. There's no emotion in it. Go in your box, stay there, be good. So those are the sorts of things that we can do. You have a chat with the captain, you're like, sort this out, please. We can't have that. You have a chat with, what if the captain is kind of getting after you too? She's really buying into the emotion that she's getting from her coach. What are we doing then? So in this situation, we have a real opportunity to, sorry, who was that?
Nah, don't worry about it. It's all good. Well, all I was gonna say was we have that with a captain a lot of times. You know, the coach is yelling something on the sidelines, and they're just saying different things every time. So sometimes, if you have a captain, they're like, "Can you watch the breakdowns ask them to be more specific, or and then a lot of times if they don't have an answer, I think that is kind of a cue for them. Oh, I'm just keying off of my coach. I don't actually have productive or constructive feedback for the ref, or if they say, a specific infringement and it's not something that I'm seeing, sometimes I'll say, well, do you have a number? Do you have a specific player that you're seeing do this? And honestly, the majority of the time they don't. And one that also cues back to me that, okay, it's likely that it's not, or it's possible that it's not an issue, right? And then also that it kind of puts the onus back on the captain to give you feedback that you can actually do something with. That was it. Thanks.
Perfect. So Marlena is definitely playing our chess game here. So she's identifying that, okay, is the player going to give me anything back here? Are they just getting it from the coach? If they do, then I will do this. If they don't, then they are very clear on the fact that they're just getting it from their coach, right? Like Marlena's thinking 2 moves ahead here, and that's exactly what we're trying to get at. So yeah, absolutely. Like there's ways to engage in brief conversations. Marlena just gave us a fantastic example. And then what we don't want to do is maybe let people in, right? We don't want to start a conversation. We for darn sure don't want to start a conversation with that coach. So we can use our temporal separation. We can take a little extra time. We can definitely use our physical separation. We can walk away. You're like, I'm going to stand at the back of the line out when I'm close to this sideline. I'm going to get a little bit more space. If I do have a chat with the captain, I'm going to have a chat with the captain over there somewhere, nowhere near this coach. These are opportunities. Other than the captain, is there ever time a ref identifies a leader in the pack or a leader in the back? So that's definitely an opportunity. So just to finish the thought, yes, we're definitely using our physical separations in this. Sometimes our temporal, back out. Don't necessarily let somebody embroil you in conversation. So sometimes, yes, I'm reluctant to do that as a general rule, just because the team has elected a captain. I am reluctant to step in and disrupt a team structure that I don't necessarily know a ton about. I see what I see. And, we've all had the situation where the guy who's elected captain, you're like, I'm not sure about that choice. Or you have a situation where there are team dynamics that maybe I don't understand. I've just met this team today. I don't necessarily know what the history is. And then, I don't want to get into a situation where I'm relying on a leader that has not been chosen by their team. However, it is absolutely a valid strategy to sometimes, especially just sort of even making eye contact with somebody else, if somebody's not behaving in a positive way, even just making eye contact with somebody who seems steadier or somebody that seems like they're open to the referee. Sometimes even using that very, very soft tool, the extremely directed tool of just eye contact. You as the referee have not done anything to recognize her as a forward captain or a backs captain. You as the referee have not opened the door to any additional conversation. But what you have done is that you've recognized that there's perhaps not positive activity happening here. Can someone do something about it? You as a referee have taken the tiniest and subtlest of actions in that circumstance. Thank you, Vince. I appreciate your validation.
Following up a little bit on what Marlena just said, and the whole chess analogy, good chess players study lots of historical games. And there are standard openings, standard positions. And I'd encourage everybody to have scripts for almost every situation that you can imagine, with a goal almost to get through a game that you don't say anything that isn't part of one of your scripts. So even if it's a coach and a captain, that you have something that fits your personality, because it has to fit your comfort level of how you speak. Captain, you need to deal with your coach so that I don't have to write up a disciplinary report that's going to get him suspended. And at the point of where the line is totally crossed, the day you actually have to say, Coach, I'm stopping this game until you've left the area, that you're not thinking about what you're going to say. You've actually thought about what your 2, 3, 4 steps of escalation are, and that what comes out of your mouth is all in your notebook already. Anytime you're ad-libbing, you're largely in trouble.
Great point. Fantastic point. So as Tig said, if we're having a lot of conversation that's mentally exhausting for us as a referee, it lets people in, they want to start a conversation. Yes, we want to treat people as respected colleagues, but sometimes that conversation can be destructive. So have it in your mind, have a script, have words, right? Like a lot of referees will practice words for, especially when we're doing active management when we're running, because otherwise we kind of, the buzzword is white noise. We don't want to have a ton of things coming out of our mouth. We want short, directed phrases, comments. They're all on our script. We know exactly what we're going to say and in what circumstances, so that, as Marlena, so fabulously illustrated for us, somebody comes up to you and they say, here's this thing. And you're like, be more specific. 3 words, ready to go, perfectly handled the situation. That's fantastic. So, all right, having gone through our scenarios, having gone through our presentation, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Let's talk. Any questions about what we talked about tonight?
Hey, Gray, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to add something to what Benny said, I think in the chat about talking to other players. Something that I started adding to my games, I don't know, maybe a year or 2 years ago that I found pretty helpful. A lot of times you'll have your captain in the backs. And so in my front row chat, I always ask if the speaking captain will be in the scrum. And if not, I ask the teams to designate a speaking captain for the scrum. And honestly, between that person and the captain, I've never really needed to talk to anybody else. But just wanted to offer that in case anybody wanted to try that, or if anyone else has tried that and had success.
So I think great point. Again, I think I'll offer the caution that if we start saying, a forwards captain, or we identify more than one person on the field who is allowed to have a conversation with us, that's a door we've opened. That's a move we've made that we can't undo. So sometimes it's really helpful just to, hey, captain. All right, captain's clearly playing in the backs. These are words we're not saying, but as a referee, I'm identifying at that scrum chat, the captain is wearing a very shiny white jersey and is about this big around, probably not in the pack. So that's an opportunity where I say, I'm going to need to find someone to work with. I can maybe use that eye contact. I can maybe use some of those soft management opportunities. But maybe what I don't want to do necessarily is again, shake up that team leadership structure that's already existing. Potentially, putting my foot where I don't want it to be in terms of their team dynamic, and also opening a door for someone else to make conversation. So fantastic instinct. We definitely want to make sure that we have people to work with, especially if the captain is over there somewhere, because we will have scrum issues. We will need to address them. But how can we take actions that we can always undo, right? If I've never designated anyone as my forwards captain, I don't have to undo that if that person becomes a problem. Those are the sorts of things we're thinking about.
Hey,
Pat
just
Walsh.
one point
Sorry,
of
go ahead,
clarification.
Marlena.
I was just gonna say one point of clarification. I do say for any scrum issues in particular, because you made a great point then and throughout the presentation about, we don't want to open everyone giving us feedback. So that is an important clarification to that.
Okay, I think Marlena dropped out a little bit, but I think we got the gist there. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. That's fantastic. Ryan, did you have another point that you wanted to raise before I move on to Pat?
That same thing as Marlena.
Oh, great, awesome. Okay, so Pat, what about when 2 players show up for a team and the ref asks for captains before the match? This is a situation that happens a lot, especially with university teams. I think it's great. It's fantastic. It really helps with some teams in terms of the way that they operate and they manage practices, or they have redundancy in case somebody else can't be there. I think it's a great strategy. It can be difficult on the field as the referee. So normally what I do is just sort of say, okay. And then just leave it there. If it becomes a problem, then usually I'll try to use I'll make a note of it mentally and then try to use my physical and temporal separation if either one of those captains or the communication between the captains becomes a problem. So I'll usually just sort of say, okay, move on. And then if I have two people coming at me or they're saying conflicting things, or one of them's getting feedback from the coach and one of them's coming at me in another direction, I'll just tend to start walking away and really backing out of any soft management whatsoever. So that's my strategy. Anybody else? Questions? Okay. Well, awesome. I really appreciate you guys attending. I know folks have to drop off for the D1A call. So if you guys need to do that, fantastic. Really, really appreciate everyone being here. So exciting to have Tig and some of our refs from further away here. That's awesome. So I'll turn the recording off now.